Atlantic Schooners co-owner Gary Drummond joining us. And Gary, I appreciate the time. Interesting times in the CFL and for your franchise, obviously. Maybe I'll start there. How are things with the Schooners as we sit here today? What's news?
Well, we thought we were in a pretty good position. Earlier in the year, we had gotten the support of the city of Halifax and the surrounding community on a financial basis. I think they dedicated $20 million towards the stadium building fund. And we were progressing really well, we thought, with the provincial government on a sort of a bond, partially guaranteeing a bond issue that would cover, the rest of the cost. And we had an important meeting scheduled for March 18th. And of course, a week or two before that, the whole world sort of turned upside down. And so we've just been sort of in a holding pattern since that time. So it's unfortunate timing in a lot of ways, but it is for everybody, as you were mentioning. And, there's lots of more important things than building stadiums, I guess. But, I think from a high level, I think when we start to come out of this virus and the impact, I think all levels of government will be, looking for ways to stimulate the economy. And I think infrastructure, construction is one of the better ways. I think that's kind of an accepted fact. And so, I'm very optimistic that once we can get back on track to, kind of present our case, I think we'll be an ideal candidate to get the type of backing we need to build a stadium and move forward. So, it's the situation in the world couldn't be much worse, I guess, in a lot of ways. But, for us, I think it's just a matter of being patient, and I think we're in a good position. So I'm optimistic.
I know you wondered what we would talk about today, but I have a lot of questions. And one is, can you take me inside that Halifax market? Because when those football fans out there found out you were coming on, they're all excited. We said, we can't wait to hear what Mr. Drummond has to say. What's it like out there from the football fans and the public in terms of an appetite for CFL football? Obviously, you spent far more time there than I have. What sense do you get?
I think it's easy for me to draw an analogy with Atlantic Canada being a lot like the prairie provinces, but I truly believe that is the case. I think the demographics are quite similar. I think within a reasonable radius of Halifax, there's 600,000 people. So actually, we have a quite a bit bigger, closer market than what the Rough Riders do here in Regina. And I think it would be wishful thinking to think we're going to immediately have a franchise like the Rough Riders have been the last 15 years or so. But I think, we really believe there's a lot of interest, a lot of demand. The people are very similar, I think, to prairie people, and they take to the CFL like they have in Winnipeg and Calgary, Edmonton, and especially here in Regina. So I think it's a very fertile place. And the only thing we really lack, the only thing we're at all concerned about is just, getting the level of support we require to build a stadium. I think once that happens, it's going to be a tremendous success, is what I believe.
It's funny. So we have a viewer from New Brunswick watching. He's a regular viewer, Gary, and he says his name's Mark Atherton. He says it's Halifax Schooners, not Atlantic. So here's a guy, I think he's in Moncton. And that's my question. You got to get everybody on board in the region or it won't work. But I've been to that stadium in Moncton. It's beautiful. You're hearing it. Why wouldn't you play in Moncton? They got the stadium, and it's not as big, but it's a great place. Obviously, you have an answer for that, but I don't know what it is. How do you answer that?
Well, I think, it's just, it's quite a bit smaller market. And, even I sat at that game last August. I sat next to the mayor of Moncton, and she's a very charming, intelligent lady. And, she was the first to admit that Halifax, and she wasn't grudgingly, it was just kind of a fact for her that Halifax, had a lot better chance of success and support, than Moncton did, just because of the number of people and number of businesses and so forth, So but having said that, I mean, once we get the stadium approved, I think there's a scenario where we'll we will likely play one season, and certainly Moncton would be. It is a beautiful place there, no question. I think it'd be very good for that. We've talked about training camp being there as the Rough Riders have been in Saskatoon and things like that. But I think it's not a Regina Saskatoon thing. I think it's kind of more like a Calgary Red Deer sort of thing. Maybe not quite like that, but you know what I mean. It's just not. Halifax is clearly the biggest and best market.
I admire your enthusiasm for it, Gary, for sure, and I think you're selling a lot of people. But I also have to ask you what should I say? The departure of Anthony LeBlanc means to the Schooners venture here.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, he's a very good friend, and I worked with him for 4 years very closely in Arizona, so I have a lot of respect for him, and I'm very excited for him. The opportunity in Ottawa. I think the fact of the matter is, when we started out, it was his idea, and his background is kind of on the sales and marketing, and dealing with the press and being the face of our franchise in Arizona, and now being the face of our prospective franchise in the Maritimes or Atlantic Canada. But the fact is that even by our own plans, when he was going to be involved, I was going to be in charge of the stadium project, and also in charge of building the football operations side. He was going to be in charge of the business side. So I think it's a case of for what we need right now, which is really garnering the government support and getting the construction underway. It's not a major setback. I think we're going to have to be very careful. I think there's two key. We had two key hires. One was going to be the general manager, kind of in charge of football operations, which obviously is extremely key. And we thought that Anthony had the business side, sales and marketing, had that covered off. Now, we're looking for another key hire if we get to the point where that's justified. So it's, I'm very happy for him, and he's going to be available for me to talk to as and when required, and we'll take it from there, I guess.
A viewer from Newfoundland's watching. His name's Doug, and he's a Riders fan out there, and he is curious, Gary, what the plans are for growing the game in Atlantic Canada, and in particular, Newfoundland and Labrador. How do you plan to connect with the province and its people? Are you the one to answer that, or not?
Well, I think it's just kind of it'd be a organic thing. I think that we maybe got ahead of ourselves a little bit in talking to sponsors and things like that. I think we've sort of backed off of some of that minutia, if you want to call it, until we actually have the stadium in a position where we can say categorically, it is going ahead and we have a franchise. We've talked to the various. First of all, I think in Atlantic Canada, football is better accepted and more of a factor than it is in a lot of other parts of Canada. And I think that, having a CFL franchise will only improve that situation from that sports point of view. We've talked to, it's a big community for universities. There are several good university football programs, and we'll certainly get into the communities, and we'll be dealing with we'll be supporting youth football, and we'll be supporting college football, and we'll be doing, all the things that we can do, to promote the sport. So it's a good place to, there's a good foundation there already, which is the good news. So
I got to ask you this, and I'll let you go right away, Gary, but you mentioned the 4 years with Arizona. Anthony had said to me with the Schooners, he was hoping to follow the Golden Knights model of expansion. Doesn't look like that's been the case. How would you compare NHL business versus CFL business? Are they completely different universes, or is there some similarities?
Yeah, there's, I was going to think about that. There's obviously some similarities. It's kind of, the numbers, I think it's a situation where the numbers there's a lot more zeros involved with the NHL. But I think I wasn't involved with the CFL before Randy Ambrosi took over, but I think since he's taken over, there's a lot more of a cooperation between the franchises. There's a lot more information flow between the franchises. There's a lot more emphasis on trying to get, national sponsorships and, improve the national TV contract. And I think, the franchise in Atlantic Canada sort of finishes off the all across Canada from coast to coast sort of presentation. So I think that, there are a lot of similarities. I mean, even with the NFL, I mean, the TV contract for the NFL, I think it's like $140 million per team, and I think CFL is more like $5. But then if you look at what the actual salary cap is, the TV contract comes close to offsetting, in both cases, the player's salary. So it's they're different numbers, but a lot of the concepts are the same.
Like you say, to scale. Yeah. Well, you know what, Gary? I appreciate this. This is like literally all that I had. Is there anything that you would like CFL fans to know before I let you go?
No, I just think that, we're being very respectful of the situation everywhere, but especially in Atlantic Canada. And as soon as we can travel and as soon as we're not embarrassed to, set up meetings with the politicians, I think we found that the mayor, is a very knowledgeable sports fan, and the premier is, he's a real straight shooter. And I think our timing is going to be good to meet with them and try to, form a partnership to, in our own way, to sort of help kickstart the economy there. I mean, we have self-interest at heart too, but I think to have a CFL franchise and have that big project underway, I think it'll be a good for the esprit de corps of the region, and I think there'll be lots of spin-offs and lots of tourism, and I think it's a reason for Atlantic Canada to feel good about themselves, and I think that's what's going to be required everywhere.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, good luck, Gary. I appreciate the time. Good talking to you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Gary Drummond of the Atlantic Schooners joining us, answering every one of our questions, and in very diplomatic fashion.
Absolutely.
Very positive. More positive than I expected.
Well, very interesting for me to hear the difference between the roles that he has and the role that Anthony LeBlanc has in terms of, the football operations and the stadium and business side of it. So Gary clearly can transfer over and take care of the stadium and the business side of it, but that his role was more the football ops, right? That's what I took away from it. So that's the football team is covered with Gary. That was his role all along, and now, working on bringing the stadium through and getting that completed and construction and stuff, that becomes now a focus for the group. I thought that was very enlightening.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.